Greetings, friends. It's an honor once again to welcome you back to Rick's Garage. This past week or so, I've achieved a couple of milestones. As you may recall from my last video, it was my 200th posting on YouTube. And this week, I've achieved 5,000 subscribers. I want to thank you very much for that. This truck came in yesterday. The owner was complaining that he was getting a burning smell. Well, I didn't have a lot of time to look at it, but I spent a few minutes with it, and he left the vehicle here for me. First thing I did is I opened the hood and I checked the serpentine belt, and that seemed to be fine. There was no smell coming from there. The engine was not overheating. And then I turned my attention to the wheels. I thought perhaps a caliper was sticking. Now, I get a lot of questions about how to tell whether you have a bad caliper or not, and this is what I'm suspecting here. The first thing I did was I took the temperature of each rotor. What I used to take the temperature of the rotors was an infrared thermometer. These things are fairly inexpensive. You can buy them for about 30 bucks or so at your local parts store. You may be familiar with them because your doctor's office, when you enter, will aim this little red dot at your forehead to take your temperature before you enter. They've been doing this since the pandemic. So I checked the temperature of each one of the rotors. Now, we live on this country road. There's a lot of farm country in the area. Matter of fact, our house is built on an old cow pasture. So driving on a leisurely country road like you see here, you would expect the temperature of the wheels to be somewhere between 100 and 120 degrees, really no more than that. If you're driving in the city, you would stop and go, yes, it will be much more than that. Or if you're coming off a highway from a high speed and you're slowing down for an exit, your wheels could heat up pretty good. But a leisurely drive on a country road, I think the speed limit out here is 25 miles an hour. Your rotors are not going to heat up that much. So if they are getting hot, you know there's a problem. So as I said, I only had time to just check a few things. I took the temperature of each one of the rotors. The rotor on the passenger side was 105 degrees, about what you would expect for this type of driving. The two rotors on the back were just under 100 degrees at about 85 degrees. Well within what you would expect. The back rotors don't do a lot of the braking, it's mostly on the front. But this one wheel right here, the driver's side front, was approaching 200 degrees. So we know that this rotor is overheating for some reason, and the most common reason would be a stuck caliper. Okay, friends, what I've done here off camera is I've raised the vehicle and lifted both front wheels off the ground. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go inside the truck, I'm going to start the motor, I'm going to pump the brakes a few times, and then we'll see if both wheels are turning freely. Okay, that ought to be sufficient. All right, I'm at the passenger side now. This was the side that was running fairly cool, as you recall. This wheel is turning nice and free. There's no problem there. Let's go back to the side that was overheating. I can't budge this wheel. There it goes. So this wheel is definitely binding. So we got to find out what's causing that. So we're going to pull this wheel off and see what's happening here. Two things that come to mind. One would be a sticking caliper. The other would be a restricted brake hose. Okay, friends, off camera I took the wheels off. And I pumped the brakes again, and I've stuck a screwdriver in one of the vent holes, and I can't budge this rotor, so it is definitely sticking. So it's two possibilities. Either it's the caliper itself is sticking, or we have a restricted brake hose. What happens when you have a restricted brake hose is the inner core that carries the fluid will crack and break, and it'll act as a check valve. It will cause the fluid to go through and apply the brakes, but when you take your foot off the brakes, it won't allow the fluid to return to the reservoir, thus causing your brakes to get stuck. So what I've done here is, you can see I've put a screwdriver in one of the vent holes, and I've got a wrench here on the bleeder nut, and I'm going to loosen this bleeder nut. Now if this caliper immediately frees up after loosening the bleeder nut, then we know that the problem is being caused by the brake hose. So let's see what happens here. Okay, let's see if this thing frees up. And it does, it frees up perfectly. So let's retighten this. So that's telling me we have a restricted brake hose, and that's all it is. Now we're very lucky that the owner of the car noticed this problem immediately. He smelled the slight burning smell and immediately called me. So he caught it early on. There was no damage to the rotor, no damage to the brake pads. We just need to replace the brake hose. Okay friends, it's the next morning. I didn't feel like coming back out here after supper last night, so I waited till this morning. The other reason is in the morning I'd be working in the shade here. So anyway, we're ready to pull this hose. I've got a pan under here to catch any fluid that leaks out. Alright, first of all I'm going to unclip the ABS wire. We don't want to damage that. So let me do this so you can see what I'm doing here. This just unclips from this little holder here. And we got that out of the way. Next I'm going to take my 10mm ratchet, and I'm going to remove this bracket that holds the hose in place. That came off fairly easy. A little longer than it really needs to be. Okay, put that on our tray. Okay, next I'm going to remove the bolt that holds the bottom part of the hose to the caliper. Try to do this without banging the camera. Always interesting to have room to work and giving your audience a decent view. Okay, that looks like that'll come off with my finger very easily. There should be two little brass washers. I'm not sure if the new, as you can see we're losing fluid, I'm not sure if the new hose is going to come with those washers or not, so be careful not to lose them. Right now the washers are still attached to the hose. So we're going to be replacing this hose, so if the new hose doesn't come with those, we'll recapture these. Okay, so the last thing I have to do is to remove the tubing from the hose, and then we've got a little clip that holds the hose onto the bracket. For that I'm going to use the 13mm ratcheting tubing wrench. Works quite well, actually. It's the first time using this tool. Oops, spoke too soon. Allowed it to slip off a couple of times. I think that's my fault, not the tools. Yeah, this ratcheting tubing wrench works quite well if you can keep it attached. I think I got that loose enough. I can grab it with my fingers. Yep, that's disconnected. Okay, I'm going to take a little punch and knock out that clamp the rest of the way. There it is. Fell down into my bucket that I'm using to catch the fluid. I'll retrieve it later. So this should pop out of there now. And it does, very easily. Okay, so we have this out. And we're going to put it on the bench and see what's going on with it. Friends, I've got the old brake hose on the bench here, and as you can see, I've hooked up a vacuum pump to it, and we're going to see if it is indeed restricted. So hopefully you can see the gauge on the vacuum pump. You can see we're building up pressure. And it's pretty much holding. So this hose is pretty well restricted. Now I'm going to go up and get the new hose, and we'll repeat the same test on the new hose. And you'll see the difference here. I'm going to release the pressure. So this shows that the fluid is not returning to the reservoir and is keeping the caliper engaged with the rotor, thus causing all the heat. Okay friends, I'm back with the new brake hose. Just to show you the difference, I'm going to submerge one end in brake fluid, and I've got it hooked up to my vacuum pump the same way I had the other one, and I'll show you the difference. See, it's pumping up, and you can see it's coming right down, and it's filling up that tube with brake fluid very easily. So this hose is not restricted at all. Friends, this video is already getting a little longer than I intended it to be, so off camera I installed the new brake hose. It's very simple, just put it back exactly the same way you took it out. I also off camera bled the brakes. I really didn't need to show you that. There's lots of videos. If you don't know how to bleed brakes, there's a lot of videos on YouTube that show you how to do that. I have a video using the motive power bleeder. I'll link it at the end of this video. Also, I just want to mention that I replaced the bleeder nut and I put anti-seize on it for the next poor soul that tries to bleed these brakes. I just went ahead and pumped the brakes, and I want to show you that this rotor is turning nice and free now. So looks like we're all set. That's what it was. It looked to all the world like we had a stuck caliper, but in reality it was a restricted brake hose. So please, by all means, do not be fooled into replacing a caliper needlessly. Always make sure that your brake hose is not restricted. So that's all I've really got here at Rick's Garage. I want to thank you all once again for 5,000 subscribers. Before I go, like I said, I'll post 2 videos to your left. One will be using my motive power bleeder, and the other one will be a video that I hope you find of interest. Feel free to click on one or the other. To your right will be a picture of my avatar, as always, in the form of my trusty German Shepherd. Please feel free to click on that if you wish to subscribe. Once again, I want to thank you very much for watching. We hope to see you all very, very soon.